Welcome to the Thought Balloons podcast. I am your host, Jeff Folsham. With me today is my good friend, Major Grunge, a Twitch streamer, an all-around great guy, I want to say polymath. This guy is very smart, very knowledgeable about many things. And today we're going to talk about many of those things. Major Grunge, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's good to be here. That's a high praise. I really appreciate that. One of my, the lead singer of Iron Maiden was a polymath, and I think he's a really cool guy.
I am never unimpressed about the insight that you have to literally like any topic that has ever been brought up around you. You always seem to have great insight into literally everything.
That actually means a lot. I think, honestly, the truth is I read a lot, and I think I just retain some information well. I have really bad short-term memory, but for whatever reason, I feel like when I read something, it sticks in my brain more so than if someone tells me their name. I'm likely to forget it pretty quickly, honestly. But reading, for whatever reason, sticks, and so that's what I think it is. But who knows? Maybe I'm one of the lucky brains out there.
Oh yeah. I mean, luckily we have our names in the chat here, so you don't have to remember mine. But yeah, right out the gate, I know you studied philosophy
Yes.
in school, and I back in the first interview I did with Mr. Abstracto in episode 2 of our podcast, we were talking about the psychology of addiction and all that stuff. He's currently getting his degree in psychology. But one of the things that came up was, I want to say, it's funny. I still haven't double checked this, so I still could be wrong all these episodes later. But I believe it was an episode of Vsauce. I think it was the I forget that YouTube Red show he did. It was like Mind something. But Michael from Vsauce, I'm pretty sure, did this experiment where they like put EKG or whatever, like that hat with all the like electrodes on it or whatever, like on your head, and it was like reading your brain patterns, and basically the idea was try and hit a button before the computer sounded a buzzer. And it got to the point where like people were trying to like fake out the computer, but like, I'm not going to touch the button, and then they try and push the button kind of thing. And it was just reading the electrical signals in your brain that have to fire to do the motor function of actually pushing the button, whether or not you're thinking about it. And it got to the point where people were like, I wasn't even thinking about hitting the button, and it just went off. And they like showed them the results, and we're like, well, this is the same spike every single time. Like, and it raised the question of if your choices actually come from your subconscious, right? Because it was like your subconscious dictating things before your conscious mind was actually like going to do the thing. The question that I have for you philosophically is, if our subconscious is dictating things, and if we have like no control over the subconscious, does that mean we live a determinist life? Do we have free will, or is it all random, or is it all fate?
So there was a philosopher that I initially didn't like his theories at first because he talks about God a lot. He was a modern philosopher, Baruch Spinoza. I believe it was Spinoza. I'm almost positive. And if I'm wrong, it's Leibniz. It's either Leibniz or Spinoza. But they both talked about very similar theories, and Spinoza influenced Leibniz. So regardless, I think this will be a valuable insight. But they both talk about God a lot, which was initially appalling to me until my professor at the time explained to me that in this modern era of philosophy, many of the philosophers refer to God because the way discourse had evolved at that point in time, describing things bigger than humanity and bigger than the self was almost always just relegated to this abstract concept of God, especially because if
Mhm.
you were to not acknowledge God at that point in time, there's a good chance you would have been in a lot of trouble,
Right.
maybe even executed. So the way they talk about God is that maybe God has determined all things, right? And that God has determined our lives and our world and the way things are meant to develop, but that we have no idea what his plan is, and we never will have any idea what his plan is. So we may as well have free will because we are unaware of the determinist path. And I always thought that was a compelling theory because it just kind of addresses the question of, even if we don't have free will, why does it really matter? Because we're never going to know what our
Right.
trajectory is. It's impossible. But I actually do believe we have free will. And I think we especially have free will because when it comes to questions of the subconscious mind, so one beef I have with psychology is that the understanding of the human mind in psychology and in neurology, there's a lot of questions they can answer really well, but there's still many questions that they have no answer to, or no real answer to.
Right.
And this comes up with psychedelic research a lot as well, especially because so little psychedelic research has been done. But LSD is a chemical compound that many neuroscientists know what it does in terms of the electronic impulses in your brain. And if they, put you in an EKG or a CAT scan or whatever while you were on LSD, they could tell you what was happening in your brain. But still doesn't explain what is happening in your mind.
Right.
And of course, the mind and the brain are two different entities, but they are linked, right? They are linked, at least psychologically, they're linked,
Right.
traditionally speaking. And that I always thought was a good case study for whenever a person is tripping, especially if they're tripping really hard. Johnny Neurology could tell you everything that's happening, but that's still not going to make any sense. And it's still not going to explain why you are experiencing whatever kind of fear and loathing visions you are experiencing.
Exactly.
And
I w-
so I guess my answer is that for me, philosophically speaking, especially when you get into anything metaphysical, anything like beyond our current world, there's just so many questions that can't be answered by psychological values and by even neurological values, that I don't think that even like a rigorous test can really determine whether or not we have free will.
That's interesting. And you mentioned the LSD and all these the tests in the neurology and how it can like mathematically show what's going on. I wonder if there's to see the difference in perception, right? To like I wonder if they've done tests on like twins, like on identical twins, genetically the same, especially if they're like still and this is probably getting into like some weird like ethical, like of course they can't do that. I'm just thinking hypothetically, right? You have two people genetically very similar who grew up together, right? Had very similar personal experiences in their life, and then you dose them with the same amount of LSD. Their brains are probably going to be functioning very similarly, right? But like I wonder, like, would one of them maybe be seeing like a green dragon flying around, and the other one is like seeing like, their cousin like riding a bike across the ceiling, and like, why would like, like, even if like, I guess to kind of like summarize my thought is like the experiences you have versus the science, right? Like the math. It'd be really interesting to see through two different entities that are like genetically the same, but like how their life experiences affect what is happening in their mind versus
Yeah.
what's happening in their brain.
I personally think, and there's no way I can know for sure, but even with twins, I think they'd have distinctly very different experiences.
Me too. Me too.
And even if their brains lit up the same way on the scientific apparel equipment, I bet their actual what's the a priori experiences would be the word that would be well used here, would be significantly different. But honestly, like I can't know that for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it would be something that you literally would have to like test. It was just a thought, like, you know, talking about the separation of the mind and the body. Like we already know like about, you know, identical twins, like their experiences, they become very different people, right? Like
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
your mind and your is not your body, vice versa. So even though they have the same genetics, they can become wildly different personalities simply through their life experiences. It would just be an interesting way to, you know, do that kind of thought experiment.
And no, it is. It is a good one. Also, I realized I used the wrong. So I said a priori, which is not knowable independently of experience. What I meant to say was a posteriori, which is knowable on the basis of experience. It's been a while since I
Gotcha.
was in school for this, so some of the terms I get mixed up.
No worries, no worries. I know how that works. Half of the terms that I learned in art school, I still don't know the meaning of, like, but
Did
I
you? What did
use
you
them
go?
and
What
I
did you do
sound
with the art
smart.
school? I'm actually like, where did you do art school, and what was your experience with that? I'm really curious because I know a lot of people that have like some people that have loved it, some people that have felt like it did more harm than good. I'm just curious.
Well, so I got my BFA in illustration from a teachers college. It
Okay.
was not like a like an art institution or like anything like that. I didn't go to like the Pittsburgh School of Arts or whatever. Like some of my friends eventually transferred. Um, so it was just like a small town USA, you know, like local college. Most, like I said, it started out as just a teachers college. Now it's technically a full university, but the biggest thing they do is education and whatever. You know, pump out a lot of teachers for the state system, school system. Um, it wasn't an overall terrible experience. I definitely see the value in it. There's just a lot of things that for me specifically, it didn't really line up well enough. You know, I had a one of my professors, Philip Huber, was a person who I had known before going to school. I was in 4-H, you know, showed
Oh
horses
yeah.
and stuff like that when I was a kid, and his kids were in it as well. So like, I was in the orbit. Like we weren't good family friends or anything, but like I knew him, and he was someone who I talked to before going to Lock Haven University. For school, and he was like, with what you want to do, you shouldn't go to LHU. I signed up for it anyway, and he's right, he was right. Like you know, wanting to do comic books and sequential art, LHU is not the school to do that specific thing with. We don't have any no classes to do that. um, I harbor a little bit of resentment towards him specifically because he was the one, he was the professor who did run the class that you do get to draw a comic in. And at the beginning of the semester, I was like, hey, you know, I've already done an independent study where like I did a comic. It's a lot of work to do a good project in a short amount of time. So it's like, I know that our, you know, since I know that our final project this semester is doing a comic book, can you at least tell me what it's about so that I can like write the script beforehand? That way I can use all of those 2 weeks on just the artwork. And he was like, no, I'm not gonna do it because I want you to pay attention to the other project. And I was like, fucking whatever. So by the end of that semester, I was just like super mad because I like talked to him about it like a couple of times and he kept saying no. And so at the end of the semester, when he finally like did like it, you tell us what it was, you know, I had to like within 2 weeks, I literally had to write and draw like a 10-page comic, which is insane. That is insane. Like, this
I
is
believe
someone
it.
who does fucking like comics now for, I don't want to say for a living because I don't get paid enough to live off of it yet, but like I have done, let's see, I've done 4 full-length issues and multiple short stories. It is lucky if you can do a full page in a day, just the black and white parts, and then a full other work day to do the colors, right?
Right. Yeah.
So to
Yeah.
do 10 pages in 2 weeks, like,
Well, and most of this,
what?
I imagine most of the studios that are putting out comics have, well, okay, so I don't know as much about comic studios per
Mhm.
se, but I do know about animation studios. And I know
Right.
that an animation studio, of course, has a lot of people working on like any given frame to
Mhm.
divide up the work so it can be done in a
Exactly.
relatively short amount of time. And if one person's doing all the animation for a show, it's going to take
Forever.
forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just fucking forever. And so I imagine comic books are similar in that regard, the level
Right.
of work.
Yeah, last October I did a fantasy noir story about a dwarf detective teaming up with a an elven prostitute uh to like, it was like a twist on like the Jack the is it Jack Ripper? What's his name? Yeah, Jack the Ripper, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, for some reason the name Jack didn't seem right, but yeah. But so instead of like this like doctor guy like killing like lady prostitutes, it was like this like devil, like it was a bone devil like killing male prostitutes. And like the government corruption was all like, oh, it's got to be a pimp war. And like, but no, because it's not just two pimps like John, like whatever, like going at like getting murdered. It's like all across the city, and like it doesn't seem to be like focused on any one person. But anyway, so I did this thing. It's up for free. Anybody listening to this podcast, fulshermart.com/btb, that's short for Beware the Bone Devil. You can read it for free. It's a free PDF. I wrote it with my Twitch chat. We wrote it together. And then I drew the whole thing. It's like 22 pages. I drew the whole thing in October of 2020 for the Inktober, Arttober drawing challenge. 22 pages in a month almost killed me. It was so hard. I There was only like 3 days that entire month that I didn't work on that comic book. And most of those days I was doing like 10 to 12-hour days of drawing. Like, it was madness. And that was black and white. That wasn't even color. That was just black and white. But yeah, so to answer kind of your question about like how comics are made, typically there's like a penciler. Sometimes the penciler is also the inker. But there's a penciler, an inker, a colorist, and then someone does a lettering, and then obviously there's a writer and editors as well. So there is like that kind of separation, right? So like a penciler will typically, pencil a page in like a day or maybe 2 pages a day. They'll send that stuff off to the inker. The inker will ink that, 1 or 2 pages in a day. They'll send that off to the colorist. The colorist will do 1 or 2 pages a day. And that's just like a rotating cycle. And that's how you get the stuff out like every single month, right?
Huh, okay.
Um, when it's one person, when I'm doing it all by myself, all the way like from writing all the way up through colors and lettering, um, it's hard to say how long the scripts take because some of them are really easy, they just flow. Others take a really long time. Like, I've been
No, I know
trying
what
to
you mean
write
in that
my
regard.
graphic novel. Like, so I did 3 issues of something called the Osrin Tales, which is a
Yeah,
fantasy, just
I'm
fantasy
familiar with the
adventure.
Osrin tales.
I've been I was having a little trouble writing volume 2, and I was like, well, I think it's because I don't know my characters. And so I was like, you know what? I know where the two main characters are going to end, like at the end of the graphic novel. And I was like, I need to figure out the other two main characters. And so it's been I've just been piecing together the whole story, like all 25 to 50 issues or whatever it's going to be. Um hard cap at 50. I'm not going to do more than that. But so yeah, it's writing's weird, but when I actually sit down to draw the thing, it takes me about a month and a half to 2 months to do a single issue because I don't have anybody helping me. It takes a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
um
No,
but
it's totally.
but yeah, just to kind of cap it off, swing back around. School itself, I think for me, um, I had not drawn for a while. I had graduated high school, kind of stopped drawing, went to film school for like 3 years, dropped out of film school because depression, and then worked for another 3 years and went back to art school in the fall of 2013, I think. And then I had to spend a whole year becoming a matriculated student before I even did art stuff.
Matriculated student.
Yeah, so matriculation is like becoming like an actual, like, honest to God student within the school
Ugh,
system.
there are all these fucking rules. That's why I dropped out.
Well, so the thing is,
I'm not a
um,
rules guy at all.
well, when I went to Penn State and the depression kicked in, um, I had a roommate who gave me some really bad advice that I like took to heart, which was, you're paying for it, so you shouldn't have to go to class if you don't want to. And I was like, you're right, I am paying for it. I don't want to go to class today. And then I just like didn't for
Ah,
2 years.
yeah.
um I went to like all my film courses, like practical filmmaking classes and stuff like that, but history, math, science, fuck those. Nah, not doing it. And because those were things I didn't want to do, and I was struggling with depression and not knowing what was going on because I was a pretty well adjusted teenager. But 19, 20, going to college, being away from home for the first time, did not handle that well at all. um and yeah, so I dropped out with like a 1.1 GPA or something like that. And they accepted me to LHU on a provisional basis. I had to take two courses and get B's in both of those courses. Not B minuses, B's.
Oh yeah, that's right.
First
I forget they do the
semester,
minus plus thing.
yeah, so first semester, I got a B in my English class, or I got like a B plus or something, and then I got a B minus in my philosophy class that I took that semester, which meant that spring 2014 I had to take two more classes and get B's in those, and that was like the second chance. If you don't do it, then you're not in, like, you're out,
Right.
right? But that was just because I had a really shitty GPA coming in. Like, normal people, they don't have to go through the matriculation process. That's just me being a shitty person and a shitty student. But yeah, once I got into art school, though, I think the things that I benefited from most was a direct line to mentors. Like, doing things on the internet, if you can find a community to get like actual feedback on stuff, like, oh yeah, that's good, does nothing for you, and saying, oh, that's bad, does nothing for you. But saying things like, you need work on perspective, or you got your perspective good, well, right, you did perspective well, like, being specific and then constructive in the things like that you've done wrong, like, okay, you did this part wrong, but also here's how to fix it. um Even if you can find that kind of community online, I think there is an added benefit to being in person. um just because, um I don't know, like, if you're doing it digitally and you're in Discord and stuff, I think you can come really, really close to like the same sort of stuff. But like, being able to like talk to the person, right, is a big thing. Like, actually talking to them like we're doing now versus text, right, is huge. And then also being able to see the professor or an older student or whatever actually do the thing. Like, these are the lines you should make, or the shapes you should make, or here's how you do a gradient with like this particular tool. um Actually being able to see how they're manipulating the tools in the paper is like really really helpful, instead of just getting some text feedback and like a picture of someone correcting your work, right? Like the seeing it actually being done, very helpful for me anyway.
Yeah, no, that
um
makes a lot of sense. I think one thing I've found a lot through Twitch is mentorship, and things that maybe I didn't even know I was going to go into. Like I loved studying philosophy, but I knew the whole time I was in college that I didn't have any interest in doing anything I was being funneled into. You know, like
right.
I knew I didn't want to do any of it. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was just trying to get through the day. So I was trying new things a lot outside of college, which is when I got into fashion and art. And I was never involved in any kind of art in my childhood, really. I never took art classes at school or anything like that. And I just assumed I had missed the boat on it. Like, and I don't do any
Right.
sort of illustration or visual art in that regard, but I had always done a lot of performance without thinking too hard about it. Like I would MC events for my high school, and I worked at a summer camp every summer. And in hindsight, I credit the summer camp with teaching me a lot of performance things, because I would
Nice.
host a lot of campfire skits and do various bits
Hmm.
throughout the week. You know, I'll do my characters on my stream.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
I was working at my summer camp, I was running the waterfront. It was a Boy Scout summer camp, and I introduced and pioneered a bit that we kept going for like 5 summers in a row, where all the waterfront staff were pirates, and we had all sorts
Nice.
of like pirate lore we developed, and we had this plastic drum that probably once contained something, water or oil or something, that we put a little flag on the top of and painted on the side the dreadnought, and we had a little syncathon, and we put a staff member in the barrel, and they would paddle it around. Anyways, so I developed all that stuff, and then everyone liked the idea, so we did it. And whenever I was thinking to myself, you know, like where did I learn how to perform? That was probably where it was, honestly. And so like
I
I wasn't
love
in
it.
drama class, but I was at Boy Scout camp, and I did a lot of skits there, and we sung a lot of camp songs, and that sort of thing really helped me learn how to do it. And so I never thought that's like something I would be doing professionally, but somehow it just kind of panned out that way. But once I figured out that is what I wanted to keep doing, then I started to really find mentors for that. And
Yeah.
that has been way more valuable to me than any schooling in my life has. And like a lot of appreciation and respect my philosophy professors. They were amazing. It's just like I did pretty well in those classes when I was there. I was not good at doing homework, but that's kind of an ADHD thing. So no
Yeah,
surprise there.
homework fuck sucks.
But I was like a good student when I was in class, and they were great professors. I just was not really that passionate about school. I was passionate about
Hmm.
philosophy, but I wasn't passionate about school. And so that was never going to work out. But somehow this weird series of events has brought me into doing something that I actually like, which is like, I feel very fortunate that I stumbled into it, like Todd and BoJack Horseman.
Hell yeah. It's funny that you mentioned Boy Scout camp and how it like got you performing. I think one of the big things that and I talked about being in a band a little bit in the episode I just talked about myself in. But I think the thing that like really got me like over that hump of performing on a stage in front of people was also related to Boy Scout camp. Closing campfire every year.
Yes,
Um,
campfire. It's a
I
big deal.
would, yeah, we do like a kind of like a talent show kind of thing,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
every
yeah.
year, and I always did a stand up act. Like I
That's
wouldn't
amazing.
like I didn't write my own jokes or anything, like, but I would like curate just like most of my it's so funny to say, thinking of a kid in the early 2000s, like 2001 2002 around there at summer camp with a book of Milton Berle jokes saying these like one liners and stuff from a comedian who had at that point been dead for 40 years and had his heyday in like the 30s and 40s, like this tiny like little kid like just talk like 30s and 40s like era jokes. Like I had these two giant volumes of like just jokes that he had written, And I was like, anything that was like even remotely applicable to like Boy Scout life at all, like I would just put into these sets and then do them. But it definitely got me over that hump of like performing publicly. I think, yeah, it's fun that we both have that experience.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for Boy Scouts. I know they get a bad rap nowadays, but it was a really good experience for me. And honestly, without it, I wouldn't be able to do Major Grunge now, which is like Major Grunge is, I mean, he's me, but he's like, he wouldn't fly at Boy Scout camp. He's seditious and on the no-fly list. But I learned how to have a stage presence by accident, I guess, and it was kind of a cool, fortunate experience for me.
Hell yeah. So so we've touched on performance and your Twitch career a little bit here, and we've touched on me doing a fantasy comic book. I think bringing those two things together. Before we started recording, you reminded me that you had been on another one of our friends, the Harry Horror Show, and talking about magic and
Love Harry.
things. I think fucking natural segue right there, right? Let's bring those two together. Give us a little recap of what you talked about on that show.
Okay, yes. Let me grab my caffeine real quick and then I will start that. All right, we're back. Sorry, it takes me forever to wake up. I'm such a night owl. I don't like fully wake up till like 10 p.m. honestly, which is absurd, but until then I'm just like fighting off the demons.
I'm the same way. I'm actually trying to I don't know if you know Dodgy Paper.
I do actually. Yeah, I saw Danny do something on one of their papers once.
Yeah. I'm trying to get him on the show. He's from Melbourne, Australia, or Melbourne, as they say. But
Don Dodgy, inventor of Dodgy Paper.
yeah, and I'm trying to get him on the show. And as I was like talking to him about like scheduling and stuff, I'm like, you seem to be a guy who's like up during the daylight hours. Like whenever you want to do this recording is good with me, because I am on a Melbourne time schedule. I wake up at 7 a.m. Melbourne and I go to bed at like 10 p.m. in Melbourne. But I live here in Pennsylvania, the United States. So I'm like, I wake up, late afternoon and I go to bed at like 6 a.m.
Yeah. No, I definitely have been the same way for a while. I don't know. It kind of works for me. I think I kind of dig it. But on magic,
yeah.
So I did an episode with Harry, and I've done a lot of episodes with Harry at this point in my life. I did it on specifically magical secret societies throughout history. So the ones we covered were the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, OTO, Ordo Templi Orientis, and Aleister Crowley's Argentium Astrum. And it was a really fascinating deep dive I got to do. And I ended up reading a lot of books. I found this really crazy online mega drive full of scans of occult literature that I used to study a lot of things, as well as just hunting down primary sources online of people that I could talk to and learn from. And I had already had some interest in magic because I don't know if you're familiar with the Midnight Gospel.
The TV show, right?
Yes.
I've seen a couple episodes of it. I have not fully immersed myself quite yet.
So there's an episode of the Midnight Gospel. I want to say it's episode 2, in which the person Duncan Trussell is talking to is a guy named Damien Eccles. And Damien Eccles has a really fascinating story. He was part of the West Memphis Three, and the long time he spent on death row for a crime he didn't commit. He spent a lot of time in solitary confinement, which was brutal. And he's free now. He's been exonerated, but his story was really fascinating because while he was in there, he was searching for spirituality. And he was ordained as a Rinzai Zen minister. He spent a long time studying Zen Buddhism. And then he somehow, I think, came back to magic, which is something he had a brief fascination with in his childhood. But from the way he had described his experience with magic, is that it did a lot more for him than Buddhism had spiritually, because it connected with symbols and things that he understood,
Right.
while simultaneously having a large focus on many of the techniques that Buddhism uses to develop present thinking, as well as just overall, I guess, spiritual health. And so hearing him talk about magic in that way, I thought was really fascinating, because all I had ever run into from magic before that was occasionally interesting people, a lot of people that struck me as just doing it to be kind of edgy and cool,
Yeah.
and then a lot of people that were just kind of Instagram witches. And when I say that, I mean like they just, they just wear like cute shit that's witchy, which is like, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not trying to talk shit here, but my point is, I didn't think it was serious.
Right.
I thought it was more or less something people were not actually invested in, but were just invested in for the aesthetic of it.
Right.
And once I heard Damien Eccles talk about it, I saw that there was real spiritual value there. So I started doing some digging and research to understand what it's about. And of course, this magical practice is not big in the 21st century, at least not in any meaningful sense. But it does still have a following. And after reading up on all this information for the Harry Horror Show, I found myself actually very fascinated with it. And so I kept reading and I kept picking up more books and I kept practicing some of the techniques, like doing tarot readings. And one of the rituals that all outsiders are allowed access to for the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn is a banishing ritual called the Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram, which is essentially, I would say, like a ceremonial meditation. That's been my experience with it.
Okay.
And as I've gotten more and more into this world, I've actually really found that it's been benefiting me. I've always felt like I wanted to tap into some spirituality, but I'm a big time skeptic, big time
Me too.
skeptic. So most religions didn't work for me, and this isn't a religion, which is what I like about it. It's the way that Damien Eccles talked about it was a good pitch, because he said it's for seekers and people that enjoy questioning the establishment. And so all the symbols you deal with in magical practice, you may be referencing an archangel or a demon or something from maybe a Christian literature, but they also involve a lot of other literatures. They involve the Hebrew Kabbalah, they involve Eastern disciplines as well. And it's not necessarily that you're praying or offering reverence to these deities, but it's acknowledging that in our universe, perhaps these manifestations of energy exist that have power and wisdom beyond our human understanding, and that you're more or less recognizing them and recognizing whatever wisdom they might have. You're not sitting down and giving yourself to them. You're not kneeling, at the feet of a king that tells you what to do, but you're essentially just recognizing that there exists something bigger than humans.
Right.
And I have always believed that is the case. I just have never known the nature of it. And I don't know the nature of it now. But the idea of dancing around with it a little bit has been really fascinating to me.
I really like that, and it's something I've kind of skirted the fringes of myself, doing research for the fantasy comic that I do, and like I've been DMing for like 10 years or more at this point. Fuck, I don't even know how long. Probably closer to 13 or 14 years actually, but um it's definitely something, with like the whole satanic panic around like D and
Oh, yeah.
D and like, oh god, you're worshiping the devil, and so like
Yep.
I did like
That's
some
actually
research
how
into that,
Damien
and
Eccles got witch hunted for his crime. He played D&D and liked like reading Aleister Crowley and liked metal. And they saw that and they're like, well, clearly he worships the devil. And
right,
like
yeah,
obviously he's guilty.
so it was something. Yeah, it's so super cool. I really like as far as being a skeptic and stuff, like it was something where I have yet to actually get my like registration or whatever, but like I am very slowly, like when I have time to look into it, I'm on my way to becoming a dudist priest in the Tao of the Dude,
Oh, right
because
on.
why the hell not? But I actually have the Tao of the Dude over on my shelf. And it's really interesting. Like it's kind of like a meme, right? Because you're learning about Taoism through the freaking Big Lebowski of all things. But like,
Yeah, yeah.
um, but it's really interesting because like Taoism isn't really it's not a religion with a deity. It's all about like personal growth and like finding like the divinity within yourself, which is I think is really kind of interesting.
Absolutely.
So
And
I
I think
dig.
magic is quite similar in that regard. It's
Yeah, yeah.
I think Buddhism is the same way. The cool thing too
A
about a
lot
lot
of
of
Eastern
Eastern disciplines.
religions are.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and when I was studying Buddhism in college in my Japanese philosophy class, one of the things they pointed out to us that like our idea of religion is not something that is common to all parts of the world. That like in Japan, if you went and asked someone, you said, "Oh, Buddhism, that's your religion," they'd be somewhat confused because like it's the way we view our religions is very different from how it's viewed over there to an extent. Of course, that's, there are obviously a lot of Japanese Christians, and I'm sure people that are
Mhm.
exceptions to this rule, but like historically speaking, Buddhism and Shinto and the Tao have been like things that have existed and sometimes coexist in these societies because like they
Right.
just are. And it's not that you have to, owe allegiance to one religion. And so I've always thought that was
Right.
interesting and a
Well,
better
because like
approach.
the Buddha was just a guy who was like, wouldn't it be cool if we were all nice to each other? And like kind of just wrote down some ideas. Like it wasn't, as far as what I'm aware of, it's nothing like he was like, yeah, so I talked to this burning bush and this like entity from another realm of existence like told me this is how we're supposed to live. He was just a guy who was like, wouldn't it be better if, and he was just sort of like it came from a human place, right? And
Absolutely. Well, and it was
so
like the four noble truths, of the world being suffering and that we're all human beings stuck in an infinite cycle of samsara, which is just pain,
yeah.
that we must relieve the karmic burden in order to attain enlightenment. And enlightenment is, is the only way you break the cycle of samsara. So it's not about, you know, uh, paying allegiance to some god so that you can go to heaven when you die. It's about doing serious soul work
Yeah.
and fixing your karmic burden and escaping the infinite cycle of pain. And it's also about helping others on the path to enlightenment. But it's all human to human. And
Right.
even the Buddhas, there's multiple Buddhas at this point, and then throughout the history, of course, the one of the first Buddhas that's referenced is Siddhartha Gautama. But the Buddhas aren't gods; they're just enlightened teachers.
Right.
And I've always preferred Buddhism to a lot of the religions that I was introduced to growing up because of that. And the more I've learned about Judaism, actually through magic, because a lot of magic references the Kabbalah.
Right.
And it's
Yeah.
often the Hermetic Kabbalah, which is like which is different from the Hebrew Kabbalah, but it references a lot of Judaism that I didn't know existed. I realized through studying magic how little I knew about Judaism and how different Judaism is from Christianity. And it's fascinating.
I agree. I definitely like looking into this stuff just from a academic approach. Um I was listening to a an interview with, I want to say his name was Jordan Peterson, who is just another like scatter shot like guy who knows about everything. But he definitely was talking about like philosophy and things like that, and religions. And yeah, he was talking about how um even like growing up in Western society, in America or whatever, even if you were raised atheist, you still have a religious upbringing because it's so saturated in our society. And I was kind of thinking back on like my own views and like how I've like lost my religiousness, um, you know, like that REM song. But
Yeah.
uh it's definitely something where like I'm not a fan of the institutions. Um and a lot of the things I think have been corrupted by man to attain power. But at the
Absolutely.
core of it, like there's a couple of things that I'm just like, yeah, like the golden rule, right? Like do unto others as you would have them do to you is pretty chill, you know? Like I had joked when I was in school like that because like I went to back to school like later in life, and I was like fucking I'm coming up, Jesus fucking he did his like traveling around and talking to the world like when he was 30, and I'm gonna be 30 pretty soon. Like what if I started my own religion, you know?
Yeah.
And more just out of a like kind of we don't live in a society right now, I don't think, where you could really invent a new religion, right? Like everybody is in their own minds like, oh yeah, but science and all this stuff. Like, how hard it would be to like convince someone that you're an actual prophet like these days? Like it would be impossible. Like anybody
You
who's
have to be a celebrity. Jared Leto's done that.
yeah, but like does anybody really think he's like we're
Well,
not,
I mean, not many of us, but some people do. He has a pretty decent sized cult now. Uh,
yeah, but like the
well,
two
I think
also
that
convince
honestly,
people that
like, have you ever read the book American Gods by Neil Gaiman?
I have not actually. I
Okay,
need to,
it's
but I have
good.
not.
Well, there's a moment, well, because all the gods in Neil Gaiman's various universes are usually like real existing like people that walk the
Yeah,
world. And
yeah.
so there's a moment where one of the gods is talking about how like the gods of the new world, the new gods are technology and fame and like money and all these things that people like they don't worship in the same way that people worship God, like literally, but they kind of
Hmm.
do. So like the way that people treat, let's pick an influencer that is beloved. I don't know.
PewDiePie,
Yeah, whoever that is, that guy.
right?
Whatever, like famous person, insert famous person here, Brad Pitt, fucking George Clooney, whoever. Like the people who are really devoted to following that person may as well worship them.
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Like someone that truly stands BTS, you know, like K-pop group, like on Twitter, those true hardcore BTS stands may as well be a religion. For, like the level of their devotion is so intense.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. But I think, it's like could we at this point in time like really develop like could there be the next Jesus that in 2000 years people are like, well, did that guy actually exist in the year 2020?
I
Like I
don't
don't know
know.
if you could do that because like a lot of people, like a lot of the people now that say like, oh, I talked to God and this is the message that he wants me to tell the world. Like we put them in institutions and dope them with drugs so that like we're like, no, that's aberrant thinking. Like you're just hearing voices. You're, borderline personality or like schizophrenic or like all these other things, and we just label them or like, oh, you just ate a bad batch of mushrooms and like that was just a thing, like
I think that I think you're right in that regard, but I also think there's been an interesting rise of people that are like starting to pay attention to spirituality again. I think like some people have gone out the other side where they become disenchanted with the modern world and they're now looking to
right.
reconnect with older spiritualities, and a lot of people that are connecting with maybe something more like an indigenous spirituality, like maybe the roots of wherever maybe their culture came from, whatever kind of pagan roots they might have had, they wish to reconnect with those or reconnect with maybe like a magical root that someone had. Maybe someone came from Latin America and they're trying to reconnect with maybe something like brujeria or
Right.
Yoruba root magic from Africa. And I don't know how big of a phenomenon this is, but it's definitely something that's been happening. And I think another interesting thing to look into is all the people that have been experimenting a lot more with psychedelics, especially DMT, because DMT experiences, from my perspective, are quite close to what I think a religious experience would feel like. And I think once you've done DMT and you've really, really like been to the DMT world, you start to question a lot of the why of our universe and like what you experienced. And part of you is like, oh, it was drugs. And that part of you is like, was it though? Really? Like, was I actually like tapping into something? And then you start asking more questions, and it puts you on this path of realizing that maybe like there are definitely a lot of questions science cannot answer and will not answer potentially ever. Just things
Right.
like the miracle of our universe existing on the massive scale it exists, and like how ultimately, no matter how intense the hubris of mankind, we're ultimately a small speck of nothing on the grand face of the universe. So it's like there has to be something bigger than us. Who knows what it is, or how it is.
I
And
couldn't
even if
agree
you're to
more.
turn to science, right? Like the CERN particle accelerator, right? They've proven mathematically there are at least 7, probably as many as 18 parallel dimensions to our own. And so
Right.
when you start asking those kind of questions, you're like, what exists in those parallel dimensions? I don't know. Maybe that's what someone who is religiously inclined would call a place where the gods live or something like that.
Yeah.
Who knows? I mean, I don't. I'm just saying that there's a lot of unanswered questions.
No, I agree, man. And it's something where like even through my own experiences, I used to be very religious as like growing up as a kid, to the point where like I can remember as a child, like when people would ask me what I wanted to do, I'd be like, I want to be homeless, and they were like, what? Like, you can't do that. I'm like, yeah, I'll just live in a cardboard box. And they're like, you
I
can't
want to
do
be
that
free
as a
from the
thing.
trappings of your capitalist system.
Yeah. And like legit it was like a thing, like, and that I said, and then like when they told me that that's not something that I could do, I really liked, the Robin Hood mythos and stuff, and I was like, well, fine, if I can't be homeless, then I'm gonna be Friar Tuck. I'll become a Franciscan monk. Like, I like even as a kid, I was like, fuck it, I don't need material things to be happy. Like, I just want to
Yeah.
be like, I just want to exist, right? Is basically like my goal
No,
was, can I
I
just
very much
exist,
understand
please?
that.
Like, I don't want to do things.
Why do you keep
Um,
putting, yeah, why do you keep putting expectations on me? Can I just exist and explore my humanity?
yeah. And so like it went from something where like I was pretty religious and I was like, I don't think like, it wasn't like a conscious goal of mine to actually become like a monk or anything, but like when it came time for like confirmation and all that shit, I was like, yeah, like I'm in it. Like, let's do this. But by the time like I had gone through high school, and I started like actually like thinking for myself and like questioning things, like I then became a very vocal and staunch atheist, like just completely 180'd, right? um and I was on that train for a while until I ate a bunch of mushrooms and
Yeah.
forgot who I was, experienced ego death. And but then I've told this story like elsewhere, so I'm not gonna like do like the long version of it. But basically, had like a legit out of body experience. Like I saw myself like sitting in my chair, like at my desk as I was tripping, and I floated out my window. I floated off the planet Earth. I floated out of our solar system, out into the intergalactic space where every point of light that I saw, I understood wasn't a star, but its own galaxy. And I felt so disconnected from everything. I couldn't remember my name. I couldn't even remember what a human being was. And I felt this connection to the like infinite sadness of the universe, that existential underlying, that white noise of sadness that we all feel, because
Yeah.
like every sentient being knows that it's gonna die, and we're like, what's the point of like existence if it's all temporary and futile? Like
Yeah.
I felt in tune to like that background noise of the universe. And when my being was able to conceptualize the question of like, what's the fucking point, I heard a voice say, don't be an asshole. That's all I heard, was just don't be an asshole. And like I woke up the next day and like, it wasn't DMT. Like I haven't like experienced DMT, but I definitely think like, when we talk about Was it the drugs? Was it some tapping into something else? My philosophy now, as an agnostic anti-theist, like I still don't like religions, but I think there is something like an energy or something out there that's bigger than us.
Yeah, I think I go for the energy as well. Like that's my idea.
Yeah.
Like when I think of an angel, someone's like, okay, you can call that an angel. I think it's a being of like a more refined being, maybe of energy.
Yeah.
More like, you know, you think it's an angel, whatever. Fine. You can think that, but I think it's just like something next level than human.
Right. But like to go back to the thing about whether or not it's the drugs, like especially when it comes to natural compounds, right? Like things that
Oh
aren't
yeah.
like scienced up in a lab. But literally, you just eat like
Well, DMT is fucking natural, which
yeah,
is the crazy thing
exactly.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's ayahuasca, right? Is DMT.
Well, yeah. Also, the human brain, when it starts dying, it releases a profound amount of DMT
Oh
from the
shit.
pineal
So,
gland, hence the whole third eye thing.
yeah. So like that's what I'm saying is like when these things are natural compounds, like you can
that
go
our bodies are meant to utilize. Like our bodies are wired to accept DMT, and our bodies are wired to accept psilocybin. Like the fact that we can utilize it and experience that makes me think we're meant to experience it.
And that's what I was going to get to is like, especially these natural chemicals. When you say, is it the drug or is it something more? I think it's definitely something more, especially, you know, I don't know if I believe in a creator myth, but like if we were created, right? Let's just say hypothetically, some astral being created us and created the universe and everything else in it. Well, why then create stuff like psilocybin and DMT and give us the brain receptors to utilize those things if we weren't meant to, right?
Absolutely. And why give every human being, every living thing, more or less, has some amount of DMT in it? Which is why you could famously just like take a bunch of grass and distill DMT from it with the proper laboratory method. Which is just why it's such a there's so many reasons why it's a fascinating compound, but that's one of them for me. It's just that it seems to be this like common thread we share with a lot of life. There's just a lot of little like things that seem too convenient to be coincidences, and I don't know the answer for it, but it definitely keys me into the idea that there's probably something else going on. And I'm not fucking what's the word, I'm not nearly as, or I don't have enough hubris to assume that I am the beginning and the end, and that human beings are the beginning and the end.
And that is a mentality that I, as we go to break here, I think that is a mentality that I would like many people to adopt. Like, just because we are aware of what's going on around us and that we may be the autobiographers of the universe does not mean that we are bigger than the universe around us. Like,
that's right.
We are so small. And I think that humans, we have a real issue with ego. And,
oh my God, absolutely we do.
Yeah. And I think it's a good for all of us to like meditate on the smallness and insignificance of our being, not to be depressing, but just to like understand that we should be doing good with the limited amount of time that we have on this planet.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I'm gonna leave you all with that thought as we head into our break here. And we'll have more with Major Grunge right after a few ads. Do you want to class up your gaming? Are you sick of card tables and cheap plastic sleeves for your character sheets? Do you like real wood and are convinced magnets are the only magic we have left in our current age of science? Then head over to legendcraft.ca to spruce up your tabletop gaming setup. They offer felt top gaming tables with add-ons like cup holders, tablet holders, dice trays, roll boxes, and more. Newly released in January 2021 is their Magna Tracker system. With versions for both health and spell tracking, these sleek and stylish tracking boards come with magnetized tracking pips that allow you to slide them back and forth along clean-cut channels. making tracking your health and spell slots easy to use and read, all without the constant erasing and writing on your character sheet. And did I mention that both the Magna Trackers and the tables are customizable and personalizable? That's right, your table and or Magna Tracker will be one of a kind when you order at Legendcraft. Legendcraft is partnering with me to offer you a 5% discount on your orders at legendcraft.ca. That's right, you can get a 5% discount when you enter the code F_ART at checkout. That's F_art. Go to legendcraft.ca. That's legendcraft.ca with discount code F_art for 5% off. Legendcraft.ca. Order today. If you like this podcast and would like to support the show, head over to patreon.com/Fulsham_art. As little as $1 per month, you not only support Thought Balloons and get to submit questions to be answered by myself and the guest host, but you will also have access to my webcomic 3 to 4 weeks before the release to the public and my weekly update blog. At higher tiers, you'll gain access to full issues and short story comics, and you can even see progress and add input to projects I'm working on. That's patreon.com/FOULSHAM_ART to support Thought Balloons today. And we are back to the Thought Balloons podcast, part 2 with Major Grunge. Welcome back to the show.
It's good to be here, gamer.
Likewise, my gamer. The gender neutral pronoun for 2021.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the first half of the show, we talked about philosophy. We talked about magic. Very eclectic kind of metaphysical things. But I think, there is a bit of magic that is, unruly. It's a little counter culture as it were, which I think is a good segue into the other thing that we want to talk about here tonight. Which is the DIY, right? That's pretty counterculture. Like it's do it yourself, like break down the rules and stuff. So let's head from the metaphysical to the physical. Tell us a little bit about your history with DIY and punk and all that kind of stuff.
So I didn't really discover. Well, okay, so I had semi-discovered punk because one of the very first records my dad gave me growing up was Fugazi's 13 Songs when he got me a record player, and this was in middle school. And then before that, my dad introduced me to a lot of punk, but I didn't really know about the scene then. And I was also in middle school, I was like a young, ultra nerdy kid. I'm still an ultra nerdy kid, but that was like all I was back then. And I just played a lot of Xbox, and I had these like really thick glasses. I had a bowl cut, a braces, like a very quintessential nerdy kid, almost like I was from a movie or something. And I got picked on a lot.
And suspenders.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I got picked on a lot, and like I had some friends, and I loved my friends to death, but also like I was definitely semi-dissatisfied with like society and my standing in it. And I think later on in high school, I began to find the DIY scene because I grew up in Tallahassee, Florida, which actually I still to this day has a very rich DIY scene. And they had house shows all over the place. Even the shows that they had at venues were very like DIY inspired, generally speaking. And the general like ethic of the region, whether it was punk rock music or not, was that as far as the Tallahassee underground and independent scene went, that like DIY was the way. And at the time, I didn't know that DIY was a much bigger thing. And I learned that later on once I started reading a lot of punk rock biographies and books. And I learned about like Black Flag, of course, being one of the bigger influences on developing DIY punk. And it started to become more and more of an ethos for me, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
And so having experienced the DIY scene in Tallahassee, it kind of gave me finally a community that I actually felt some degree of belonging in. And it also, I don't know, it gave me something that I was genuinely interested in that was, I guess, able to elevate me out of being just a kid who had a really negative high school experience. Like I could escape that, right?
Right.
And then throughout my life since then, the DIY scene and the punk rock scene has very much been one of the only places I've ever felt at home and truly at home.
So for our listeners' edification and for my own, I'm very bad at like parsing genres and stuff
Yeah, yeah.
and all that. Like, you know, I have a friend who's a DJ, a producer, I don't know, a musician. He does like electronic music and stuff, which he would be really mad for me saying that he plays electronic music, because he's like, nah, man, it's like, and then he'd give me like a 14 like, you know, adjective like micro genre. He's like,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
specifically this, and I'm like, well, what's the difference between that and this other thing? He's like, oh yeah, we only do music in the key of F sharp. Or like, I'm like, how is that, like, what, like, how is, like, you're exactly the same as another genre, but because you only write songs in a certain like BPM or like a certain like register, like it's like a completely different genre, like what? So my question is, you say DIY punk, is DIY punk different than like other types of punk? Are there like non-DIY punks? Because all of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
punk kids that like I hung out with in school were always like super into like the DIY, like at least in my limited scope of like
A
making their
lot
own
of punk is
clothes and
DIY.
like doing their own stuff like that. And like I'm curious as like to like, what is DIY punk versus like other punk?
So like a lot of punk is DIY inherently. Like the reason why DIY and punk are so tied together, well, there's a few reasons. First of all, a lot of the majorly influential punk bands that come out of the 80s, especially hardcore bands, had a DIY ethic and how they did their shit. And so Black Flag is a really good example of this, because Black Flag a lot of times made all their concert posters like the day of, you know, they'd fucking draw it on the spot, and then they'd like print a bunch of copies and plaster it up everywhere. You know, they'd paint a shitty banner and throw it over whatever venue they were able to lock down for that day before the cops chased them out. And like that was DIY. And so Black Flag was, I mean, other bands did this too. Black Flag was just one of the really prominent examples of it in the punk scene.
Right.
And so like Black Flag then, with this DIY ethic, was able to inspire a lot of other people. Like, you don't have to fucking have a label or a manager or anything. Like, you can do it. It's going to be weird and hard and messy and like fucking kind of like filthy, but you can absolutely do it. And if you're punk, that's kind of cool anyways. And so that's sort of, that's not necessarily where it started, but that's a big watermarker for where it developed some serious traction in the punk scene. And a lot of punk by default, like people that are really deep into punk, are probably quite DIY as well. The punk that I would say is not DIY, for the most part, it's going to be anything that's produced with like a major label. It's going to be anything where it's not kind of grassroots, I suppose. So I think a pop punk is more often than not, it's quite far from DIY.
Okay, so like you got your Hot Topic punk kids out
Yeah.
there.
And they, you know, I try my best to not shame anybody. So it's like, you know, you do you, whatever, but it's not DIY. Make no mistake. And and then you have cats like Machine Gun Kelly that are quote unquote punk, which, you know, whatever the fuck that means. But that makes me so mad. I
thought
can't
Machine
stand
Gun
him.
Kelly was like a rapper.
He was. He was. And then
punk.
I think he he dissed Eminem, and then Eminem roasted him back, and then he left rap in disgrace, and then he decided he was going to release a pop punk album that to me just sounds like Imagine Dragons, but he says it's punk. And then he went on Genius and he talked about what it takes to be a punk rock musician, which is what really pissed me off. I was like, you know, you release your shitty album, whatever, you know, that's fine. I don't care about that. But then if you had the fucking audacity after releasing your one pop punk album to tell people what it means to be punk, get the fuck out of here, dude.
Right. I also feel like like at least from the guys that I know that are like into the punk scene, telling like even expounding on what it means to be punk almost seems anti-punk, right? Because it's such a personal
Yeah,
free thing. It's just like
it is. And which is one reason
whatever
why
you
there's so
want it
many
to be
subgenres, right?
almost, right? Like
Yeah, yeah. Well, you talk about like experimental punk, art punk, avant-garde punk, post-punk. Like there's a lot of types of punk because punk is inherently such a free scene. There's like
yeah.
punk encourages people to do weird shit with their music, you know? You get into noise and no wave. You ever listen to like Sonic Youth? They do all kinds of weird shit. And the question is like, is this
Mhm.
punk? Like, well, it is punk because of the way they approach it, because of their methodology. I'd
Right.
argue like what makes music punk for me is not as much the sound as it is the people, how the people make the music and the
Right.
why of the music.
Yeah, like when I was in a band, like and I'm just speaking of the band that I was in called 10,000 Yen. I would label that as indie punk because like we were definitely like DIY doing it ourselves. Like we were just like a bunch of high school kids, you know, like reaching out to like venues and stuff in our state and like just fucking literally like I had a fucking two-door fucking Ford Focus hatchback that I could fit like my guitar amp, the other guitarist's amp, the bass amp in it, our like big PA speakers, our two monitors, the PA head, and all of like the guitars and in it, right? Like the two, like our two guitarists' guitars, like my guitar, his guitar, and the bass guitar, right? And then me and my bassist, we would just be in the two front seat. The rest of the car, just equipment, right? And then our drummer had a van, and he'd have his like drum kit in his van, you know, and like any extra shit like mic stands and stuff that we couldn't like cram into my fucking Focus. And like him, like the drummer and the other guitars would be in that car, and that's just we'd get around that way, right? And you know, we were just like late high school kids, like fucking doing these like fucking house shows and like really small venues and stuff around not even like big cities. Like we never like played shows in like Philly or anything, but like we traveled like, you know, probably like 2-3 hours from our house, which is like I live right in the middle of PA. Like 3 hours you can get to the east, west, or west border from where I live. So, but like, you know, we weren't playing like punk music. You know, the songs I wrote had a like a Weezer, Modest Mouse kind of vibe to it. But like fuck it, like we were doing it all ourselves, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think that's, oh, for me it's always been the key is how you approach it. And I mean that's why I think things can be punk rock that don't sound punk. I think there was a, what was it? Maybe it was Hot Ones, or maybe it was Nardwar. It was the second, it was either the second Nardwar interview with Henry Rollins or Hot Ones with Henry Rollins, where
Hmm.
they're asking him questions about whether or not he thinks, I think it was Hot Ones now that I'm thinking about it more. They're asking about certain things that he thinks are punk that may not seem punk. And of course, Henry Rollins is someone I look up to. And Henry Rollins is the lead singer of Black Flag. I'd say he's actually qualified to commentate on things that are punk.
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah, I think most people would agree. Unlike Machine
Like
Gun Kelly, fuck
when I
you,
think
Machine
when I
Gun
think
Kelly.
punk, I think of the silver fox known as Henry Rollins.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you know, the whole point to the bit, and I can't even remember what his answers were, but the point was like there are things that are punk rock because of how they go about executing their game plan. You know, anti-establishment a lot of times,
Hmm.
against the grain DIY, like you're not playing by the fucking established rules, maybe, right? Like I think it is a punk rock way to go about life if you decide, like, I'm not gonna do Johnny corporate ladder thing and I'm just going to attack from all angles and see what breaks through. And so you could be a
Yeah.
punk rock fucking, you could be a punk rock Twitch streamer or whatever. And
Right.
I guess my point to it is that like punk gave me so much more than just music. And the music is obviously something I love and it continues to inspire me and uplift me to this day. But like punk also taught me that I don't have to live life a certain way, and that like it's okay to make enemies, and it's okay to, you know, spit in someone's face, like straighten your back and say like I'm fucking not gonna play your game.
Hell yeah.
you status bastard. And like, I don't know, most of my life, I was terrified to break the rules, and I'm not now. And I would have never found that if not for punk.
Hell yeah. I mean, you know, looking at it through that lens, maybe I've been more punk than I thought.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Cause like, I mean, I'm not gonna like, you know, fucking mince words. Like if I get the chance to fucking work on a Batman comic or like something for like DC, like yeah, fuck it. I'm gonna take those opportunities because I like those characters. But like at the end of the day, like if I never get to work for those guys and all I ever do is like make in like my little indie comics and tell the stories that I want to tell on my own fucking terms, like I would live a happy life, you know? Because fuck it, you know, like when I was doing music and stuff, like you know, some of the people not in our band but like other groups were like trying to do like the fucking record label route, right? Sending EPs to like fucking companies, and I'm just like, why, man? Like, you know, the internet's a thing, right? Like just fucking put your shit on MySpace. Like
I always ask the question, why do you so badly want to be accepted by a wide audience? And like, is that what you want really? And then why do you want it?
mhm,
And a lot of time I can understand that people want financial security. I really do. And I get that. And especially if you're an artist of any kind, that's extremely difficult to find. Like, even if you get a good gig for fucking art, you're probably not
yeah,
still going to get paid that much unless you're at the highest levels. And I get that. And like, I don't hate on people for success per se, but I also think, and I see this a lot with Twitch specifically, a lot of people cut off and prune parts of their personality and parts of what they actually want to do to become more acceptable to a larger audience on Twitch, or to like fit a certain mold, or to make their stream all ages so they get more viewers, or to fucking get like a product partnership with, I don't know, like X gaming company that doesn't want you to talk about politics anymore. And to me, I'm just like, why do you so badly are you willing to like cut off these parts of yourself to be accepted?
yeah,
And I think it's an important question to ask yourself, because like there's a good chance that maybe that's not actually what you want. Like maybe you think you want it because it's the promise, you know, that, oh, you fucking get big and famous, you're going to be so happy and successful. But like, is that really what you want? And some people probably the answer is yes, but I think most people the answer is no. And I think a lot of times people figure that out too late.
yeah. And that's like, you know, something that I think I ask myself like all the time, you know, I talk about like you would ever work for the big company or whatever, and we're talking about sponsorships, and here like you know we have an anchor sponsorship for this podcast, and you know like I have a sponsorship for like Legend Craft that we like people just heard like 10 minutes ago or whatever, right? Like, but like those are two companies that like when I like read the terms about having them like you know as like sponsors and stuff, there was nothing in those terms of service that said like I had to censor anything that I do, right? I like worked with like the Legend Craft folks. Like it was literally just like, hey, when you're doing the actual ad, kind of don't do actual pornography because like the ad that I was going to do, it's not the ad that I have out, but like the first ad idea that I had was going to be so I know I didn't play the ad for you, but Legend Craft makes like gaming tables and stuff like that, right?
Right.
And so like the thing I was going to say is like um do you like long hard wood topped with a little bit of fuzz? Then go to legendcraft.ca where you can find felt topped wooden gaming tables. Like,
That's good.
you know, just like I was like, is that borderline? And he's like, as long as it's not actual pornography, like we're cool with it. And I was like, awesome. So like
Like
that's
that.
you know like what I wanted to like. I was like, okay, cool. We could do like the commission thing then. Like that's fine.
Well, and
Um,
I want to like make sure it's clear. I don't have a problem with sponsorships. I think the problem I have is when you're compromising your identity for
right. Yeah.
something.
Yeah. No, and
I
that's
think
what I was
there's
saying
plenty of
is like,
sponsorships out there that'll let you be who you are. And they
and those are
just,
the good ones.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely they are.
Yeah. Cause like you said, we live in a capitalist society. We all have to make, you know, gotta eat, right?
Yeah, it fucking sucks. We do have to make money. It pisses me off. But,
And I
and
think
like,
it's
I'm a bad business person. I I've been doing pretty well on Twitch like lately. I mean, well, I've been taking a break from Twitch for a couple months, which is like forever in internet time. But
Right.
you know, like when I have been streaming, I've been doing pretty well, which is cool or whatever. I don't really care about it, honestly. I just like to see people and talk to people and be there and do my thing. But I've been starting to get messages more often on Twitter from random companies that I don't give a fuck about that want me to do something for them.
Hmm.
And I always tell them to fuck off. And they say something like, well, good luck doing business with that kind of attitude. And I'm, you know, it cracks me up because I'm like, you think like I'm going to bow down and kiss your fucking boots, stream loots,
Yeah. Yeah.
esports team that I don't care about, etc. And it
Well,
just
yeah, I
really,
mean, I
that's why
came
I'm a bad boy.
across, like, it wasn't like a business or anything, but like I came across someone the other, like, a couple months back who um tried to bribe me by offering me like 120 seconds of ad space on their Twitch channel and subscribing to me at tier 1 every month just so that I would raid into their fucking channel. Like,
Yeah, people want you to do filthy
what?
shit,
I'm like,
especially these
no.
esports orgs on Twitch. I got a message from one of them. And I was actually pretty polite to this person, but I really wanted to be mean, but I just decided not to. I think I was feeling sweet on that day. And it's a team. I'll even add them. They're called Nemesis GG, and they're fucking absolute pyramid scheme scam artists. And I already knew that. But a lot of esports teams use the same business model that they do, where they try to get a bunch of affiliates on their team, affiliates that really want to be successful on Twitch, which I could get that, you know,
Mhm.
and they promise them all these things. And they especially target people that are more esports, like Call of Duty streamers and shit like that want to be successful. And they're like, you do all these things and then you plug our brands. And like one day you might get to make it to the partner team or whatever. Like their partner team isn't even substantial, but also they are what they're really doing here is getting people to plug all their brand sponsorship for free.
Yeah.
Well, they
Yeah.
collect a ton of money off of gullible people that think that they're getting something, but they're really getting nothing. They're being manipulated and used and squeezed dry. And yeah, honestly,
Yeah.
my biggest regret is that I didn't tell them to get fucked, and I shouldn't have been so nice.
I
I
have the
really
similar
want to be a
regret,
good
but
role
like
model in
for
that regard.
yeah, I mean, I have a similar regret with that one person, like for me, but it was just like for me, it was something where I was like, I'm like in my 30s now, and this person is like many years older than me, and they were acting like a teenager. And so I was just, like it's kind of petty, but like it was something where I was like, I'm just gonna stand. I was gonna take the higher ground. Like I'm not gonna like debase myself and like go to this lower level
I
and
get
match them on their own playing field, even though it would feel really good to just let out all of like my thoughts and feelings about them. But like, nah, man, like I'm gonna be the more mature person here because it's fucking ridiculous that this gray hair is like doing these things. But yeah, no, I definitely think it's like fucking what are your options in the society, right? Like do you go the corporate route, wear that white collar and suit every day and like, strangle yourself with that noose we call a tie? Or like do you work with certain companies here and there on like an individual basis to kind of promote your own shit? I've actually been thinking, kind of like, and I'm sure we'll talk to Jeannie about this when I get Jeannie brought on here. But like, with him backing away from like promoting like Twitch and stuff, during September, that whole thing that goes around in Twitch, and subscriptions are like discounted and stuff. Last September, I was trying to get people to go to my Patreon, right? Because I was going to be releasing a short comic and a couple other things, right? Like I was like, hey, for the next couple of months, like there's gonna be like big content, so like go to the Patreon and subscribe to it. But like after talking to Jeannie a little bit, I've been considering leaving the affiliate program on Twitch just altogether and just pushing my Patreon and being like, hey, if you want to support this channel, like go to my Patreon because you get more content out of me that way, and B, you support me more directly instead of giving your money to Jeff Bezos. Give it to the cool Jeff. Don't give it to the not cool Jeff.
Yeah, I saw what Jeannie published on Twitter, and I thought that was a really good point. I've been subbing a lot less and donating a lot more. There's still some channels I sub to because I really like their emotes. And
yeah, same here.
But more like he's right, absolutely right, that like really we should be giving the money directly to people, because Twitch they take money out of both ends. They take money out of the subs that we get, and then they take money out of the subs that we give to other people. Yep. And they're just fucking bleeding us dry. And it's not like we're making a ton of money to begin with. Even like people that are like pretty big on Twitch, like still don't make that much money, like
right.
It's fucked up. So no, I think that's a good idea. And honestly.
Yeah, it's just like, I don't even have that great of emotes anyway. Like, I like using my sellout emote, a little speech balloon with the word sellout in it. I think it's like a fun little meme. Like when people ask me to like promote myself and like other people's channel, like, and I like, because I feel weird about it. So I like put the little sellout emote before and after like my links. But
yeah.
Other than that, like I also have the red spicy chili pepper from the food war, like the food fight thing they did a couple years ago. And like only one emote from that like lasted like as a permanent emote, and the chili pepper was not the one. And I was like, this is the one that I use. It's a little chili pepper with on fire with sunglasses. I'm like, it's a sick emote.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, so I have that, and then I have Fonkin's face. Like, those are my emotes. And I don't even have enough subscribers or anything on Twitch to actually unlock 3 tier 1 emote slots. So like, you don't even, like, if you subscribe to my channel, you don't even get all of those emotes anyway. So it's like, fuck, like, what am I, like, why even be an affiliate, right? Like, fucking do it some other way, like, I'd rather have the fucking like Patreon stuff, because Patreon pays out every month regardless of how much money you're getting. And there have been months where like, oh shit, that $10 that I got from Patreon that month literally paid like a subscription to a thing that like I needed for my stream, like the Spotify, like,
right,
thing. So
yeah.
I don't have ads, but now we can't play Spotify or whatever. But like, luckily I'm making a little bit more on my Patreon now. Like, if it's a month where like I can't fully pay for like my Adobe subscription or something along those lines, like it can cover at least part of like the majority of that subscription. So like, yeah, like fuck it, right? Like,
yeah,
I don't know.
Absolutely.
It's wild. But yeah, it's funny you say that you're a bad business person, because was it on, I think it was on your first podcast. If it wasn't on your first podcast, it was around the time your first podcast came on. By the way, Grunge versus All of Reality on all the podcast platforms. It's a wonderful show. But you mentioned and I forget who did the actual article, but maybe you can enlighten the listenership. The 1,000 true fans idea, like, that's something like, I was like, damn, this is some sick fucking idea, man. I like this.
I think that's the way to go about it. The 1,000 true fans. It's like it's not about being massive. It's about being like doing right by the people that really connect with who you are.
Right. Quality over quantity.
And doing that, just do right by people, do right by your people. And that's literally it. Like, you don't need to fucking supersize yourself. I always talk about, like, I'd way rather be Bruce Campbell than Brad Pitt.
Oh yeah.
For so many
like, reasons.
Yeah, exactly. And but the point here is, like, Bruce Campbell is, I mean, he's pretty notable, but he's not nearly as famous as like some of the mainstream Hollywood celebrities. But like, being a cult classic, in my opinion, is so much cooler.
Right.
Yeah. And better, and also more honest.
Well, I also feel like, and I could be totally wrong about this, but like, I definitely feel like the cult personality is someone whose fans really honestly connect with them, right? And will come up to you and be like, that one thing that you did, it's probably, you probably don't hear this one very often, but like, I saw you. It's that you had 2 lines in this one movie, but those 2 lines, man, like they really like, and you're like, holy shit, I forgot I even did that, or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
Whereas like people who go to like bigger stars are just like, I love everything you do. You're such a like, like, whereas like it's probably very genuine from that like fans perspective, but like there's a difference. I think like there's a sort of separation that you get from someone like Brad Pitt than you would get from someone like Bruce Campbell, right?
Yeah.
Like I wasn't even like, I saw like things like um fucking I'm gonna say the wrong movie because it wasn't How I Found Bruce Campbell. The zombie movie. It's not
Evil Dead, or well,
Evil Dead. Yes. I
yeah.
always want to say Night of the Living Dead, and I know it's wrong. And I know
I mean,
that's
yeah,
wrong.
there's like the whole Evil Dead, Army of Darkness.
Yeah. I found him like I found those movies after I found Bruce Campbell through the show Burn Notice. Because I
Oh
like
yeah, he did
fucking
do Burn Notice. Yeah,
yeah,
I like
because
that.
I'm a like I fucking love all that like schlock of like procedural dramas and stuff,
No, yeah, Burn Notice was
Um
pretty good. I liked that show. Yeah, it
yeah,
was
but Burn
fun.
Notice was like fun, right? Like
It
it's
was
this
fun. It
ex
was fun.
spy kind of,
And
you
Bruce
know,
Campbell's kind of like he's Sam Axe. That's his name in that show, right? And he's like an
yeah.
ex-Marine, and he's a little bit of a rascal.
Yeah, like this old washed up kind of, ex-marine, kind of ex-spy kind of guy. And
Yeah,
like that's how
yeah.
I found Bruce Campbell, and I was like, more than I think Jeffrey Donovan is like the main actor, like the guy in that.
Yeah.
Even more than him, like I was just like, fucking Bruce Campbell, man, like this is a guy who like I can like really identify with, because he's like
Yeah, he's fun.
older, he just wears like Hawaiian
He wears
shirts,
his
he's got a
Hawaiian
little bit of a
shirts. Yeah.
paunch,
He
like
does, yeah. He's not like he's got a great fucking chin. But yeah,
yeah,
he's got his
oh
paunch.
yeah.
He's
Yeah.
kicking it. He's wearing his socks and sandals, and he's sitting poolside drinking a cocktail.
Yeah, yeah. And
He's a
like
relatively simple dude, and I
it's
love
a
that about his
vibe.
character.
It's
Yeah,
a total mood, and I was in it. And so like I found the rest of his stuff through that. And I was like, so I go back and watch Evil Dead, and I was like, holy shit, like Bruce Campbell, man. Fucking you mentioned
yeah.
his chin, like Jesus Christ.
He
Like
has
I say this, I
he
say
has a
this is
book called "If Chins Could Kill," I think, or something like that. It's good.
I say this as heterosexually as I possibly can. He is a gorgeous man. Like, holy
Yeah.
fuck. That chin, right? Like, I draw comic characters and I try to encapsulate his chin sometimes. Like,
Oh, here it is. Hail to the Chin, Further Confessions of a B movie actor. And then If Chins Could Kill. That's the first book. Yeah.
yeah. Hell yeah. I mean, I'll have to pick those up because that just fucking, it sounds hilarious.
There's also Make Love the Bruce Campbell Way, which is good.
What?
Yeah. And The Complete Guide to Low Budget Feature Filmmaking, which I think he's featured in, like partially as a contributor. But yeah, I mean, he's a relatively down to earth dude, and yeah, I fucking missed an opportunity to see him do a live performance near me in Huntsville, Alabama. I didn't go because of the pandemic, but I really wanted to, and I'd definitely love to see him. But he, yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. And the love I have for Bruce Campbell will always be more intense than any big mainstream actor, because
Right.
he is significantly more, I think, relatable and likable. And I love his movies. I don't know if you've seen Bubba Hotep. That's another really good one.
I have not seen that one.
And Bubba Hotep's premise is that Elvis never died, but that he switched place with an impersonator at some point in his life because he grew tired of the fame.
Oh, hell yeah.
And so Bubba Hotep, he's like really old and he's living in a retirement home now. And he's Elvis, but no one believes him. And like some supernatural shit starts taking place and he has to stop it. But he's also like geriatric, he can't even like get around too well. But it's one of my favorite Bruce Campbell movies, and I highly recommend that.
I'm Googling it right now, actually, so that I
I'm
have
sure
it in
you'd
a
love it.
tab. I have it in a tab so that I can look this up and watch it.
It's really good. There's also a really fun one called
that premise is just amazing.
Oh, it's really good. Yeah. And there's another one he did that's kind of meta Bruce Campbell. Let me think. I can't remember what it's called. It's My Name is Bruce is what it's called. And it's like him actually. And some like ancient like spirit rises from the dead and like the townspeople go to Bruce Campbell. Like he's not Ash, he's Bruce Campbell. They're like,
Yeah.
you have to stop this. And he's like, I don't know how to do that. Like, I'm
just
like,
an actor, man.
yeah,
It's not real life.
yeah. And he's like living in a trailer out in the woods. And it's hilarious. And it's like, you know, it's a B movie. It's not like gonna win an Oscar, but it's fun. It's very fun. And yeah.
Hell yeah. Um fucking A. But you know, and that's sort of something like I feel like B actors or like these kinds of, you know, cult personalities like Bruce Campbell, they got like a DIY kind of punk kind of thing going on too, you know, because
Definitely.
they're not.
Kevin Smith is, I think, very DIY.
Oh hell yeah, dude! Like
Clerks is such a DIY movie.
Well, I mean, it literally is. Like, he sold his comic book collection and his action figure collection in order to buy a fucking camera to film the original Clerks.
And it was just his buddies. Like,
yeah, and it's like they're not even actors. Like, there's like one or two like people who were like actors, but most of those people, yeah, you know, I think Randall was an actor, right? And like you know, maybe one or two of the other people, but like fucking oh god, Walt Flanagan, right? And Brian Adams, they're just fucking dudes that he grew up with.
Yep.
Tell him, Steve Dave. Like, he's not an actor, it's just a fucking friend of his, you know.
Yeah, I love that about it. And it's a great movie, you know. And
it's a wonderful movie. Hell yeah. And then, you know, he turns all of that power into a goddamn podcasting empire.
Yeah, like, he was one of the first people on the podcasting wave. Pretty cool.
Yeah, dude. Like, I was actually looking up like whatever happened to Smodcast, because you know he does like Fat Man on Batman and like a couple other things now. But
he's been on Joe Rogan a few times too, and those are always fun episodes.
Yeah, but I was always like, so I got into podcasting like in a bad way back in like listening to them back in like 2007. Both myself and my roommate at the time had issues with snoring, and so we would put podcasts on because we shared a room in college back when I tried it out for the first time. The same guy I mentioned gave me the bad advice of, you don't need to go to class, you're paying them. We would put podcasts on as like we was like, all right, we're gonna fucking go to sleep now, like fucking don't want to hear each other snoring or breathing. So like we put on Smodcast. Like that was the thing that we listened to. And like I was just looking it up the other day because I know what Kevin Smith's doing, but I have no idea what Scott Mosier is doing.
Yeah.
And honestly, my searches came up kind of empty. Like I don't know if they're still doing Smodcast. Like, is that like, are they still doing that particular podcast, or is that?
I think they do it live. Well, I don't know if they do that one. I know that on one of his Rogan episodes, he mentioned that they do a lot of their podcasts live in like a theater. Well, they probably don't anymore because of the pandemic, but before that, they would do them live. Maybe they would record them too, but they liked making it an event where people could actually show up.
Right. Yeah, they were doing. I know Fat Man on Batman is recorded at some bar in LA that looks like the cantina from Star Wars.
Oh, cool.
And they literally just stand. I
just always love that Kevin Smith is just like a big nerd too, because like I can relate to that. You know, I'm like, thank God, you know, thank God. And he was on a Call of Duty Zombies map. That always thrilled me. It was on Infinite War, but I can't even remember what the map was, but he had locked himself in an attic because to get away from the zombies. And one of the like little quests you can do on the Zombies map is to break Kevin Smith out.
Hell yeah. That's amazing. You know, for you know, just because I have like, he's like super into comics and stuff, you know, and I draw comics. I want to say like, you know, I have fun, you know, shit talking Marvel and all that, just because they're the big guys on campus right now, and I like, you know.
Yeah, I used to love Marvel so much, but now I just kind of resent them.
I like to take the piss
on them. And I love them so much. I literally have a box of like the old Guardians of the Galaxy comics. I love them so much. This was before Star-Lord was a thing.
Yeah.
This was back when I can't even remember the lineup at this point in time, but I love the old Guardians of the Galaxy stuff. And I loved Excalibur. That was one of my favorite ones. And I really enjoyed the Secret Invasion story arc in the Marvel universe, as well as the Dark Reign. And
Yeah.
but the Marvel now, I mean, the comics are actually still pretty cool, but the Marvel Cinematic Universe just honestly pisses me off. I get so mad.
Well, I mean, it's been taken over by normies, right?
Yeah, that's I think what I don't like about it. If I'm being honest, it's like the normies have like taken a thing that I used to get made fun of for liking and made it like
Mm-hmm.
trendy, and it just
Mm-hmm.
makes me mad. It feels like a betrayal.
Yeah, and like I said, I like to kind of like poke the bear a little bit, in
Oh,
other realms, but like,
I
the
definitely
podcast
enjoy
we like to be
antagonizing
open
people.
up, and yeah, because like who doesn't, right?
Yeah.
Like, but the podcast we like to open it up. I don't have a problem with Marvel, and I honestly feel like Kevin Smith is like the embodiment of like what you should be as a comics fan. The dude loves Marvel, but he loves DC just as much. Like in his mind, there is no Marvel versus DC. It's just comics. Like you like
Yeah.
comics. Like who gives a shit if you like.
And there's all kinds of great stuff in some of the like independent brands that are like Image and Dark Horse and
Oh
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
I've really dove into Image and Dark Horse a lot more. And like since Marvel has blown up so much, Marvel used to be like most of the comics I read were from Marvel.
Hmm.
And ever since that kind of became what it became, I've spent a lot more time in Image and Dark Horse, and I've found so many series in there that I like a lot. So that's been cool.
I mean, my top comic of all time, that I fucking graphic novel that I love the most over anything is an Image comic called Chew.
Yeah.
Um, I actually was reading portions of it out on Twitch over the Christmas break. Though they're all taken down now because I don't want to like copyright infringement. It was just a little thing for me and my 4 or 5 people that showed up for story time. But I love that book so much. John Layman wrote it, art by Rob Guillory. Like it's the story is like amazing, but the art, like in things that like Guillory puts in, like the art, like little like jokes that he puts on menus or like posters, and like there's a couple of scenes that you see like a chicken restaurant. So like for those of you that don't know, I don't know if you know about it, Grunge, but Chew is about a detective, Tony Chew. The comic is spelled Cheu, or Chew. Tony Chew is Chu. But he has the power of sebopathy, which I learned to pronounce correctly after I did the reading. I used to call it chibopathy. It's sebopathy. But that's basically he gets psychic impressions from the things that he eats. He can like tell the past of like the food and the stuff that he eats. And so like in the comic, it's always like, he can pick eat a piece of an apple and tell you what orchard it grew on and who picked it and what pesticides were used on it. Or
Okay.
he could bite into something different and flash into a different thing, and it's always like a picture of him like eating like a dead body's toe, or like a like piece of the forearm, and like
Yeah.
having visions of how the person was like killed or whatever. And
That's
the
cool.
whole story is centered around the bird flu epidemic back in like the mid 2000s, and like chicken has been outlawed, and there's like this fucking space plant called a galsa berry that looks like a pineapple with tentacles coming out of it, that like tastes like chicken, and there's like this end of the world like it's fucking insane. It's just insane, and it's amazing. And like both the story is wild and out there, but then like fucking the stuff that Guillory puts in the background of like things that you don't like. I always read every issue twice, right? I read it first for the story, just quick right through, reading captions, dialogue, getting the big main picture. And then immediately after, I'd go back in and I would study the panels and stuff, and like, oh, they're outside a chicken restaurant, and like the little sign that you can like change the letters on, those things always say something funny, or the posters in like the windows for like the specials. And it's just such a good book. And that's from Image, right? Completely independent. Most of the stuff that I read, honestly, is from Image, or those smaller like indie comics publishers these days.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Man, I could talk forever about like in Image Comics specifically.
They do some really
Things I
amazing
love.
shit. I've been really glad to be able to like dig into that because I've been pushed away from Marvel now. It's been actually kind of a blessing to discover a lot of things that maybe I wouldn't have previously looked into.
Hell yeah, dude. I mean, if you haven't read Chew, like
Yeah, that sounds good.
definitely
I've bookmarked it.
definitely go read that. And if you ever need any other recommendations, like Black Science, if you haven't read that, that's like the other one that I often tell people about. This was a really good series. And I've been both of those. I know Chew's over, and I'm pretty sure Black Science is over as well. So those are like complete stories that you could just read
Right,
and
right.
enjoy.
Yeah, yeah, that
Um
sounds good. Awesome.
yeah, Black Science is really fun. If you haven't heard of that one either, it's about this like crazy like punk rock scientist guy who's like, "Fuck you, man! Like I'm just gonna make my own invention," and he like figures out how to break into like the multiverse and stuff. And the guy like who ended up coming in and funding this, and he hates his boss because he just wanted to do it on his own. Like the guy like brings his kids in to see the machine, right? The scientist guy, Grant, I forget his last name, but Grant brings his kids in to see the machine, and the boss like comes in. He's like, "What the fuck are you doing? Only like, non-authorized personnel, like blah 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 blah." And I forget exactly what happens, but like someone pushes the button like to start it, and someone else like smashes the machine with a pipe to try and stop it. And instead of like stopping the machine, it just breaks like the controls. And so the machine like goes off, and like the main scientist, a couple other scientists, the like administration guy, kind of like bad guy, right? And like the scientists kids all get like transported to an alternate dimension. And then there's like a countdown that is like, this thing's gonna go off again in t minus x number of seconds, right? So like fucking be here for that. And it just ends up going for universe to universe to universe to universe as like they try and like leave a little bit to find technology to kind of fix the machine. It's insane. It's really really cool.
That does sound really cool. I'll definitely bookmark that as well.
I think you would appreciate that one specifically because of the main character in it. He does start out as like a punk, as just like super like genius, but he's definitely like a punk. Like
Hell yeah.
I'm pretty sure that he even has like that stereotypical spider web on the elbow tattoo.
Oh yeah. I've thought about getting that one just for the trademark.
Right? Just for the memes of it all. Hell yeah, dude. But like it's so wild, man. Comics and life in general, and just fucking the things that you can do to like just do it yourself. The internet
Yeah,
is a great equalizer.
absolutely. And I think Twitch is a very DIY platform, which is one thing I love about it.
Hell yeah. Before we end the show here, I think it's a pretty nice sentiment to go out on. Was there anything you want to let the audience know about? What are you doing these days? Where can people find you? Any special projects coming up?
Yeah. So, I mean, I just spent a long time taking a break from the world, from internet, and I'm back now. I'm feeling invigorated again. So, of course, you can find me at twitch.tv/major grunge, where I do my whole thing that I can't exactly explain, but it's performance, and I do bits, and we talk about a lot of things. Sometimes they're deep, sometimes they're ridiculous, sometimes they make no sense, and I try to curate some great independent music. And I also
Oh
a podcast, Grunge versus All of Reality, which I have a bunch of pre-recorded episodes now that I recorded a little while ago that I'm going to be releasing again. And so I'm going to be back on the warpath of that. And I'm always doing a lot of collaborations with other creators and other channels because I really like working with other people. And I announce that stuff on my various social media channels, especially Twitter, which is just Major Grunge, one word, and my Discord, which you can find the link for my Discord on any of my other platforms. But yeah, I mean, I have everything linked together. So if you find any one of my channels, you can find the rest if you want to. Instagram is something I don't like anymore, but I kind of use it still, I guess. So Yeah, that's really all.
I only find value in Instagram as an artist. Like,
Yeah, I like consuming art on Instagram. I don't care about posting much myself.
right.
That's how I feel about it.
Hell yeah. Thank you so much, dude, for being on this show. I had an insanely good time talking with you.
Hey, me too.
I'm definitely gonna get you back on the show sometime in the future.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, everybody, twitch.tv/Major Grunge and Major Grunge all across the internet. If you're listening to this on any of your favorite podcasting platforms like Spotify, I'm sure you can go find Grunge versus All of Reality and take a listen to some of those episodes as well. Um,
Hell yeah.
until next time, everybody. You know, we talked about Kevin Smith. How about this outro? We say, have a week.
Yeah, there we go.